I never imagined my life would change at 65. After decades of routine and quiet evenings alone, I decided to take a trip, just one more chance to see a world I had only read about. It was meant to be a solo tour to Morocco, an escape from the monotony of widowhood. I'd booked the trip on a whim, driven more by a need for something, anything different than by courage or curiosity. The airport buzzed with strangers, yet I never felt more invisible. That changed when I saw him. He was helping an elderly couple with their bags, offering a kind smile, his energy warm and unforced. Later, as I struggled with my suitcase at the hotel lobby, he appeared beside me. "Need a hand, ma'am?" he asked. His voice was calm, his smile genuine. I hesitated, then nodded. He told me his name was Tarek, 25 years old, from Senegal. There was something disarming about him, not just his looks, though he was striking, but his ease. His presence filled a space without trying. We ended up seated next to each other on the tour bus the following morning. I'd planned to read quietly, but he struck up a conversation. At first, I gave polite answers, but his curiosity wasn't intrusive, it was sincere. We spoke of books, travel, and how silence can feel louder than any sound. His laughter was warm, not mocking. And when I shared I was a retired librarian, he didn't chuckle like most young people do. He told me his grandmother had raised him on books and stories, and that he dreamed of writing someday. There was no flirtation, no pretense, just easy conversation. But something stirred in me that hadn't for years. It wasn't about desire. It was about being seen, really seen. When our tour stopped at the edge of a desert town, he asked if I'd like to join him on a short detour from the group itinerary. "Let's go where the tourists don't," he said. I hesitated. I didn't know him. But the way he looked at me, patient, respectful, it didn't feel like a risk. It felt like an opportunity one might never get again. We took a shared taxi into a quieter village, dusty roads and sun-washed buildings greeting us. The hotel was modest, and we booked separate rooms. Nothing inappropriate was suggested. He insisted on helping me carry my bag upstairs, then asked if I'd like to join him for a walk. As we wandered through the local market, he shared memories of his childhood stories of his grandmother's wisdom, her struggles, and strength. I shared my own, the early death of my husband, the quiet years that followed. He listened without interruption, with an attentiveness that surprised me. Later that night, after dinner on the rooftop terrace, I looked at him and realized I hadn't felt this alive in years. When he reached across the table and lightly touched my hand to emphasize a point, something fluttered inside me. I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. The next morning began with the smell of spices drifting in through the open window. Tarek knocked gently, asking if I wanted to join him for breakfast in the courtyard. I agreed without hesitation. Our conversation from the night before lingered in my thoughts, and I wasn't ready for it to end. Over simple bread and mint tea, he spoke of his desire to understand people, not just know them, but truly understand their hearts, their mistakes, and their silences. I listened, curious, drawn deeper into the sincerity he carried so effortlessly. As we wandered through narrow alleys and into sunlit courtyards, he told me he had never really known his parents. His grandmother had raised him with discipline and warmth, teaching him to respect everyone no matter their age or past. He spoke of how often he felt alone in crowds, misunderstood by his peers because of his quiet nature. It mirrored the loneliness I'd carried for years, but never voiced. There was no shame in his vulnerability, and that invited mine. I found myself talking about things I hadn't said aloud in years, how after my husband died, I stopped feeling like a woman, how I started to fade in my own life. Later, as we sat near a shallow riverbank outside the village, he asked if I missed being touched, not in the physical sense, but emotionally. I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened. Then I said, yes, more than I ever thought I would. He didn't say anything for a moment. Instead, he looked at me with something softer than pity. It was understanding. That silence said more than words ever could. That evening, he offered to cook dinner using vegetables and herbs he'd bought from a local vendor. I helped him chop onions, and we shared laughter over my terrible knife skills. It was light, warm, domestic, the kind of moment that slips into your soul before you realize it. While we ate, music drifted from the street below, gentle, rhythmic, full of life. He stood and offered me his hand. I laughed, told him I hadn't danced in decades. He insisted. So I let him lead me in a slow, imperfect dance on the terrace, with the stars above and laughter echoing from nearby homes. He held me with care, not force. His hands were firm, but not possessive. The dance ended, but we didn't step apart immediately. We stood close, our eyes locked. I could feel his breath on my cheek. And in that suspended moment, I wanted to lean in. So did he. But neither of us did. It wasn't hesitation, it was respect. He gently brushed a strand of hair from my face and whispered, "You are beautiful, Margaret." My chest tightened. No one had said that to me in so long that I had forgotten how it felt. That night, I lay awake, not in longing, but in a kind of peaceful ache. A feeling that I mattered again, a feeling I didn't know I'd miss this much the next few days, passed like a dream I didn't want to wake up from Tarek, and I grew closer. Not just in conversation, but in rhythm. We moved through the town as if we belonged there together, learning each other's patterns, when to speak, when to let the silence speak for us. I noticed the way he waited for my reactions before responding, how he never interrupted, how his words were deliberate. He noticed things others never did, how my hands trembled when I was nervous, how I paused before speaking when I was unsure of myself. I had convinced myself long ago that love at my age wasn't real, that it was something reserved for memories for the past, but the way he looked at me wasn't with pity or fascination. It was with something deeper, something genuine. The morning we visited a quiet village garden, he said something that stunned me. "You've lived, Margaret, but I don't think you've been loved the way you deserve." I felt tears build up instantly, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. No one had ever said it aloud, not even me. That evening, the energy shifted. He became quieter, more thoughtful. I asked if something was wrong. He said, "I'm afraid of crossing a line with you, but I can't deny what I feel." His voice trembled slightly, and it made him human. I told him I was afraid too, but I wasn't confused. What we were experiencing wasn't just a fling or misguided attention. It was something pure, even if it had no name. That night, we sat in silence for a long time, our hands touching, but nothing more. Eventually, I reached for his face and asked if he would kiss me. There was no hesitation in his eyes. It was slow, gentle, respectful. Nothing about it felt wrong. In fact, it was the first time in decades that something had felt entirely right. It wasn't about lust. It was about connection, about being chosen, about being held in a moment that didn't care about age or judgment. The morning after, I expected shame or doubt to creep in, but it didn't. He made tea, brought it to me, and we sat quietly on the balcony watching the sunrise. He told me I looked peaceful. I told him he made me feel that way. But in the back of my mind, reality started pressing in. We couldn't stay here forever. This bubble would burst. I started questioning everything. What this meant, what others would say, what I would tell myself when I returned home. Tark noticed the shift in me and gently said, "Let's not ruin the beauty of this by rushing into fear." And for that moment, I tried to listen, but the truth was, I knew the outside world wouldn't understand. They'd see scandal where there was honesty, betrayal where there was healing. The ache of that truth began to settle in. I had stepped into something extraordinary, but I had also crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The journey came to an end faster than I wanted. Our last day together was filled with unspoken thoughts, smiles that carried weight, and moments where our eyes did all the talking. Tarek stayed close, but I could sense the shift, like both of us were quietly preparing to let go. I had already booked my return flight, and he had commitments back in Dakar. There was no plan beyond this moment, just the understanding that something rare had happened between us, and we couldn't pretend it hadn't changed us. At the airport, while waiting for my flight, he looked at me with an expression that was hard to bear, tender, pained, and strong all at once. "You gave me something I didn't even know I was searching for," he said. I wanted to respond with something poetic, something worthy of what we had shared. But all I could manage was, "You reminded me I was still alive." That was the truth of it. I had come on this trip carrying nothing but loneliness. I was leaving with a memory that would keep me warm long after the world forgot my name. When I returned home, everything felt quieter, smaller. The routine I had once found comforting now seemed hollow. My friends noticed something different in me, an ease in my step, a softness in my voice. I didn't tell them about Tarek. I couldn't. I knew what they'd think. They'd call it foolishness, desperation, even delusion. But they hadn't been there. They hadn't felt what I felt. Love doesn't come with a manual, and it certainly doesn't ask for permission. Weeks passed, and I tried to settle back into my old life. But late at night, when the world was still, I would replay everything. The words, the glances, the way he listened. One day, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, postmarked from Dakar. It was from Tarek. He wrote about his grandmother, about how he shared our story with her. Not the details, but the meaning. He said she smiled and told him, "Sometimes souls meet at the right time, even if the world thinks it's wrong." That letter broke me and healed me at the same time. I knew we would never be part of each other's daily lives again, but that didn't erase what happened. It didn't make it less real. What we shared was not a mistake. It was a brief, blinding burst of truth in a world that often trades honesty for comfort. The betrayal wasn't in what I did with Tarek. The betrayal would have been in ignoring the chance to feel again, to live even if just for a moment. And yes, maybe it was selfish, but for once I chose myself, not out of rebellion or recklessness, but out of a deep aching need to remember what it meant to be human. I carry that time with me quietly, privately, like a secret flame that no one can extinguish, not even time.